All right, back on LinkedIn. My brother Dave Weiner. We're talking about transition. Uh, Make sure you like these. Make sure you share them with your partners. The message that we have been talking about in the last several videos, last several posts, is really, really important. We're talking about with Dave entrepreneurship. Dave transitioned from military and a law enforcement career into running his own business. And what were those challenges? What kind of things did he have to be concerned about? And how do you make the rent every month? It's a big deal. But I want to ask you to take we'll rewind a little bit. When you were doing your transition in 2019, what helped you and what hurt you? What helped you from your experience and what hurt you from your experience, do you think?
I think what helped me was having, again, trusted advisors that you can go to ask questions, right? You, Wes, and others, my dad, we talked about that. So trusted advisors, to ask questions and to kind of get a better sense of things, and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
So you had good people around you that had either already transitioned, had their own business, were entrepreneurs themselves.
Yep.
Okay.
So It's really about educating yourself because this ride is not for the faint of heart.
No.
Right? You really have to be strapped in tight for the ride because the scariest part of starting your own business is the first question is well, obviously you need clients, you need to do all these things. Everything costs money. And the reality is that when you're working for months on end and you're still not seeing clients, you're still not seeing, it can become frustrating, and it can become a model where you're like, is this, am I doing the right thing? And you start to doubt and question yourself. But if you're putting your head down every day and you're doing things and you're listening to trusted advisors and you're following those things, you'll likely make some headway. And I say listen to trusted advisors because they're going to tell you to avoid all the things that they did wrong. Especially if they're being honest with you, they're going to tell you all the things that they did wrong and help you avoid some of that so you can also be successful.
And do you think that to some extent, having a law enforcement background gave you resilience as a person to be determined and to be focused and to really use those skills to do the service that you knew how to do so well as an emergency management director and chief of police, which is the services that he provides now in the private sector. But do you think those things helped you, like that determination, like we're going to make this work, it's the right thing to do, businesses need to be resilient themselves? Do you think that helped?
100%. And in this sense, you have the mindset, especially when you've worked in emergency services or public safety. Well, we're 911. There's no one else to call.
Yeah.
Right. So in that essence, as cops, we're resourceful, right? Because sometimes we had to be. Sometimes we work for agencies that didn't have a lot of money, so you had to kind of figure out.
Creative.
You had to be creative, and there are a ton of wonderfully talented people, law enforcement, fire, and all these things that could apply a lot of their knowledge, skills, abilities, and talents to being an entrepreneur and being a successful one at that. Conversely, one of the things that I would say that can hurt you is surrounding yourself with the wrong people. Conversely, I say trusted advisors, but and this obviously doesn't happen often, and in the tech world we talk about unicorns, right? So if you have this unicorn idea, all of a sudden you're going to have a bunch of people materialize around you that may not have your best interest, and it's really necessary to vet those folks in the best way possible to understand their intentions, because not everybody, business is business, and not everybody's around you to be your friend in a lot of cases. So that's why I said if you have your core network or group of trusted advisors, and even if it's only one, that's fine.
And hopefully before you transition. And before you take this journey on, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur.
And, you should really be asking a lot of questions ahead of time. Like, what does this entail? If you're going to be, like, if you decided, hey, I want to open up a restaurant, probably not a good idea in COVID world, but I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. That's my passion, though.
Well, that's okay, and there's nothing that's
it's
saying...
It's not. I can't cook. Everybody knows this.
Macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
But
I would say that if that's something you want to do, then you should read up and study everything that you can, or even, contact restaurant owners and reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a restaurant. Maybe not in the same cuisine lane or something along those lines, but do your homework and understand what it's going to cost.
That's actually really good. When we talk about doing your homework, we talk about going on LinkedIn, talking to people who are mentors or people who are experts in the field. But especially when you're going to be an entrepreneur, because you're either going to have a service or you're going to have something that you're selling, a product. There isn't too many other entrepreneurial types. But what is the market ready for whatever it is that you've got coming out? And your kind of original posture when you transitioned, what we talked about on the last post, was you weren't really sure. You had these passions, but how does that apply into the business world? And because ultimately, and we'll talk about reworking back to a government or contracting back to a government, but ultimately you're looking at, well, what do businesses want from me? What's my value? You were asking yourself that. And so I think that's what's interesting is as you're considering your entrepreneurial journey, not only do you have to think about who your client is, for in your case, not to speak for you, but governments are your client, and as well as the private sector, and education, higher learning. The other thing you need to think about is, do they want what you're selling? Whether it's a product or a service, be aware of that. Go out and look at, I want to do X. What do people who sell X make? More than likely, your product or your service is not so unique that it's never been thought of before. What's your feeling there? I mean, did you do any of that? What they call market research? Did you do any market research at all?
Yeah, I did, and really, what you really should be asking is, what is your value proposition? Because the reality is there's a ton of consulting firms out there just like mine, but what differentiates you from those folks is really the question that needs to be asked. Like, what is so different about me? Why would somebody want to hire me versus somebody else? And the reality is you have to do your homework, and each client is different, each organization is different. But the other thing about clients in general is really leveraging your network too. A lot of times, a lot of organizations, they waste money on marketing, and I don't mean saying that marketing is a waste. It's not. Marketing is incredibly important, but if you're not doing it right, you're spending a lot of money and you're not going to gain a lot of traction. But also market research goes into that, and understanding the different types of clients and
how do you reach them?
And how do you reach them? But the other thing is clients want to know that I have a problem and who's going to solve it.
Yeah,
it's kind of the Ghostbusters equation, right?
That's right.
If
you don't have ghosts,
we're here to believe you,
that's
right? So the reality is that you're solving a pain point.
That was old school Joe.
I know, right?
Most people don't understand.
I'm showing my age here, and that's fine. But the reality is you have to understand clients' pain points and be able to work with them proactively to solve them, because that's what they're hiring you for ostensibly. Is they want their pain to go away.
How about being realistic in your approach? We've talked a lot about executive protection, how that's kind of a natural transition for a lot of people in law enforcement. But they go into executive protection, or many people do, not everyone, but many people go into executive protection with like a gunslinger mentality, like, oh, I can carry a gun, so I'm going to be good at executive protection. By the way, that doesn't translate. Sorry. But you've got to have realistic expectations about the industry, about the community. What did you learn early on? Is there any expectation that you had that everybody's going to want what I got? And then was there a level setting expectation for you?
Well, I think so. the reality is no matter how good I think I am, which is never the case. It all goes back to really culture and understanding the cultural nuances in an organization. The reality is that you're going to be working with, and depending on the type, if you're doing a consulting role, I'll use this as an example, you're going to be working with C-level executives, all the way through the organization. So you're going to need to understand and adopt their language. You're going to need to kind of ingratiate yourself and immerse yourself, because you can't fix their problems if you don't understand their culture. And one of the biggest things, and we all know from transition, just because I was a chief of police somewhere doesn't necessarily mean I can go in and be the CSO at a tech company, because there are some nuances. Just like a CSO would probably have problems going into a chief of police role.
That's right.
There's still executive roles, but there are those cultural and subtle nuances that are very, very different, that need to be looked at.
And do you think that the only way, or there's a lot of different ways you can get that experience, is one way, just going and doing it? Just go get out there and push your product, push your service, whatever it is, go experience the rejection, so that you start getting like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Is that something that you had to kind of work through too?
Yeah, when, and honestly, you have a lot of conversations with people who they want stuff, and this may sound bad, but they don't always want to pay for it.
That's right.
And there's a cost for everything. There's cost for services. There's cost for, and the reality is it took me 27 years to gain the experience that I'm now bestowing to you, as the client. And that has a value. That has a tangible value. Everybody's knowledge has some level of tangible value in the context, if you're talking consulting.
Yeah.
If you're going into something like, hey, I want to manufacture flashlights, or I want to do something else, then that's a different equation. And there's some other skill sets like, hey, if you know how to machine metal, maybe you're good at building flashlights, right? Maybe you want to make the next, high-speed, tactical flashlight for executive protection, right? Maybe you don't want to do EP work. Maybe you don't want to do something that's overtly client-facing. But the reality is you're going to have some failures for sure.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. What kind of failures have you seen, and why did they fail? And is that okay? Is it okay to fail?
100%.
I think so.
You can't grow without failing.
Yeah.
You're never going to, if you're successful at everything, you're setting yourself up for failure, because then when failure hits, you're going to be so devastated that failure is okay. I give credit to anybody who starts their own business, and goes out there and doesn't make it. I give people credit, because again, this is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. And again, early on, it's scary when you don't have clients or you don't have anything going on, but you're out there every day, trying to make connections and working with people.
Especially when you're used to every 2 weeks, I get a paycheck from the G. Every 2 weeks, without fail.
Yep. Yeah. And that in itself is scary. So you have to kind of, again, going back to the prepared piece, you have to prepare yourself for, like, what is this going to be like? And income is like this. And in the consulting world, that's what it's like. It's very up and down, until you establish yourself as a known organization.
That's right.
But I also think partnering with folks, is also a good strategy, in order to gain some experience, or learn some things.
Being a subcontractor to a prime contractor on a job.
Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn from other folks. How about what are a couple of things that, like, that's quicksand, that's lava, stay away from that. What are a couple of ideas in entrepreneurship that you would tell people, definitely stay away from these things?
So the one thing I will tell you is, the minute somebody sees that you own your own business, and this happens on LinkedIn all the time, and I get it, because those folks are in business too, but there's hundreds of companies that are going to tell you they can generate leads for you.
Great point.
And I'm not saying that they're not, but you look into them sometimes out of desperation, right? And that's okay, because everybody's got to pay the bills. But the reality is when you start looking, some of the systems are rather complicated, and they make it sound easy, and it's not. And a lot of them don't have the return on investment, and they're rather,
they want money from you to give you leads,
and they're
not
not
generate. But they don't even understand your business.
But that also goes back to the bigger thing, which is this: people are going to do business with who they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
And nobody can generate that for you, right? You have to go out and generate that yourself. And if it's your business, it's your responsibility to go out there and market yourself as, whatever it happens to be. Again, a restaurant, or you're manufacturing something, or you're consulting, or whatever. You have to be able to sell yourself, because they're doing business with you in most cases. They're not doing business, and the business is the business, but they're doing business with you.
Yeah.
And that's the important part.
Yeah, putting a human touch on it, putting that face with that name. There's no easy button for marketing. It's like, this is going to take you time, and I think that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks as well, which is people transition into the private sector and they say, oh, I've got this thing, this service, or this product. Everybody's going to want it, so I'm just going to put it out there to the world.
Yep.
And they don't understand that there are a bunch of steps in between. I've got this thing, and then execution. And so there's no easy way to do this. It's a complex problem. And by the way, I think there's several different ways to get at that complex problem. There are formulas for that. There are different roadmaps for that. But that's what you have to educate yourself on. Mm-hmm. So if you're going, I think where we'll kind of leave it, I want to get your thoughts on this. When you're going into, or you want to go into entrepreneurship, business for yourself, solo practitioner, whatever, you might have a great idea, but you also are running a business that needs to make money, or you can't do that great idea. Mm-hmm. And so stick to things that you know first. If you are good at something, focus on that, is what I would say. What kind of recommendation do you have there? Should they, they've got to get good at being a business owner, right? And there's a number of ways that they can do that. But is there any advice that you have with what they should go into and focus on? Or maybe there's something that they should not go into and focus on. Like you said, like restaurants in the pandemic, probably not, at least in LA County. Sure, yeah. Probably not a good idea. They're closed, by the way.
Yes. So I'll use this analogy, which gets beaten up quite a bit. It's the Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak equation, right? So you have Woz, who was very technically gifted and had a lot of abilities to program and code and do all these things, and he had those skills, right? Steve Jobs, on the other hand, he was more the salesperson for the organization, right? He was able to sell.
And he had an idea generator.
But he was the vision guy, right?
Yeah.
So you have your technical person over here, and then you have your vision person, right? So I think in some cases, maybe it makes sense, depending on what you're trying to do. Maybe if you're the vision guy or gal, then maybe you need a technical person who can put some of those things into play. There's nothing wrong with co-founding an organization. A lot of people do that. Right. And there are a lot of organizations that are set up that way. I just use those because that's one of the most iconic examples of, how you can build something. So maybe you look at, your one of your patrol partners is also getting ready to retire. Hey man, let's go off and do something. Let's go off and do something awesome. Okay, well, but what does that look like? And then, what role? You also have to figure out what role, and you should be able to have spirited discourse on how the company is supposed to be administrated, or at least understand who's fulfilling what roles. That way, you can move along.
Somebody's got to make a decision about something.
And that's not going to say that people aren't going to have arguments and,
That's all healthy.
Healthy discourse is always a good thing for an organization, because that's usually what spurns innovation. in some cases. But, but you also have to, again, go into business with people you trust, because I've heard horror stories, and have had people reach out to me, because of horror stories, and like, hey, this is what's going on. What should we do? Those kind of things. And you kind of have to help them navigate some of those things sensitively.
Yep.
Some of the splits are amicable, some are not, sure. And that's when things can really get messy, is when they're not amicable.
So last question, so we talked about a kind of previous business that we had, that we were working off the job, or we had it as a side hustle rather. What did you learn from when we stopped doing that? And we just kind of stopped doing it. But what did you learn from that? Is it not the good stuff? Like, we learned, how to pay people on time, how to get paid on time. Those, we talked about that in the last episode or last post. What did you learn that is kind of helping you shape your business now? The things that you're sensitive to, that you won't go, the mistakes you won't go back and make.
So, and that's a really good question. In a short time, you learn a lot, right? But again, surrounding yourself with good people, is incredibly important. This week has been a lot of mental health. So I'm gonna tap on that.
Okay.
Being emotionally intelligent, SelfCare.
I don't know that we had that.
So no, we didn't.
When did we start? 2008, 2009, something like that. Yeah, we started that business. We didn't have that.
No, but I mean, understanding self-care, and very early on, I'm working 13-hour days, 14-hour days, and that's just being on the phone, going to events and showing my face and trying to connect with people and all kinds of stuff. And these are things you have to do, but you also need to be cognizant of your own physical and mental health. If it gets to be something that becomes more of a chore, honestly. And I sort of take a Gary Vee approach to life a little bit, and I'm going to throw that out there too. But, Friday, it's an okay day. I'm always excited for Monday. Why? New week, new adventures, new engagements, all different kinds of things. And, that's the kind of passion you should have, right? But if you're waking up on Monday morning and you're like, go. Then it becomes a chore, and you're not going to want to do that anymore. So keeping it to the point where it's enjoyable all the time. Doing what I do it's not about money. And we always discuss, what's it about? It's about freedom. It really, really is about the freedom that I have to go and do the things that I want to do when I want to do them. It's less about the money, and it's more about freedom.
Manage your own destiny.
Manage your own destiny, manage your own time, you manage your own day. You're working for yourself. But conversely, success or failure of the business hinges on your grind. Are you putting in the necessary hours to do what you need to do? And then, equally important, if you have employees, are you really expecting them to work as hard as you do? If you're not working that hard at all, probably not a reasonable expectation. You should be if you're the CEO or you're the founder, owner, whatever you want to call it, you should be the hardest working one in the organization. But you should also be surrounded by people who want to
share that passion,
share the passion, or share your vision for your passion, right? Hey, we want to go in the same direction. My values, my belief systems are in alignment with yours. That's great. Let's roll. Let's go do that. And that's the same when people are, this is kind of off topic, but that's like when somebody transitions out of law enforcement, fire, whatever, and they're seeking a job in the private sector to do whatever they were doing similarly, right? Does the company, are you just applying for the job because you need a job, or are you applying for that job because you believe in the mission, you believe in their core values, you believe in a lot of the things that company
you align
represents.
With their culture.
And you've heard me say this before. You should be as picky about where you work as they are about hiring you.
That's right.
Right.
So, last question.
I like long walks on the beach, and I'm a Taurus, right? So I think that Sorry about that. That'll be in the gag reel.
There's no gag reel. This is live. We're doing it. We're doing it live.
Got it. Got it.
So, you know that. So, last question. I forget what I was going to ask you. So, what's the number one thing you think people do wrong when they're transitioning? You've been around a lot of people. You volunteer at Bunker Labs, volunteer your time. You're part of a Bunker Labs program, as well as being in a master's program and running your own business and serving all your clients literally on a daily basis. So it's not like you don't have anything going on. But what's that thing that you see from people who are coming out of law enforcement that you're like, this is the one consistent thing that is always a problem when they transition?
That's easy. Ego. Leave it at the door. Check your ego.
Yeah.
Learn the word humble. Mainly because, there's a lot of, again, misperceptions, like, hey, I worked as a state trooper somewhere for X amount of years. Oh, I can go into, Facebook and be the CSO, right? Not a reasonable.
No,
it's not. It really, really isn't. So it's really, again, understanding culture, fit, and being humble and understanding that you may have to start sort of at the beginning again, just in a different, in a similar career path, but different, right? And be willing to learn. In many of the organizations that I've been over the years, if I've been hired into another organization, I kind of sit back and observe and understand how looking at how people connect and how, I've been in organizations where, we're having a meeting and everybody's talking. I've been in other meetings where everybody's got a friggin' laptop around the table and I'm the guy without the laptop with the, old school pen and paper. People are kind of looking at me. So you have to really kind of understand culture. Culture is a huge thing that you understand, and culture can mean a lot of different things in a lot of contexts. But I really think that you need to check your ego. And I think a lot of people are like, hey, I was door kicker A and I did all these great things, and that's great, and nobody's taking any of those accomplishments away.
Nope.
But before you leave the house, before you go into another place where you're trying to obtain a role or trying to be an entrepreneur, hang that ego on the wall with all your I love me stuff.
That's right.
And understand that you're kind of starting at zero, and just have an open mind and be willing to learn from others. Because ego's the worst thing here. Ego will have you crash and burn really fast.
That's a great point. We're going to leave it there. Make sure you share this with your partners. You like this, comment below. Tell us what kind of challenges you're having. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, connect with Dave and I. Our networks are your networks. Your problems are our problems. We want to help you solve them. We want to help you be successful. Thanks, everybody, for following along. More content coming soon.
Brother, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother.